Hello, coders. Hello, coders. Hopefully, you're able to hear and see me. The stream is apparently live. I've had some issues in the previous streams where the start of the stream has been a bit awkward, but I decided to put that theme music on, the intro. We haven't heard that in a while, have we? To see if I can sort out the bits and pieces whilst that was going on. Welcome to episode 145. 145 of the How to Code Well podcast. It is, what is the date? It's Thursday, the 27th of January. Goodbye, January. Wow, that's come and gone very quickly. Today we're going to be talking about 5 don'ts of software development. This is sort of a conclusion, if you will, of the past 3 or 4 streams that we've done on the podcast where we're talking about how to improve as a web developer. Those previous podcasts, they were all centered around technical things, so how to improve technically as a software developer. And this one is going to be a little bit about improving yourself. Now, this is, as it always is, completely live. So if you've got any comments, if you want to ask me any questions during the show, then please do so in the chat. If not, you can pick this up on the podcast, howtocodewell.fm. This will hopefully go out as soon as this is done after my editing. So hopefully later on tonight. I did try and do that last week and it did work kind of successfully. Usually I do this. I sort these things out the day after, but we're going to try and squeeze it in tonight. So, before we get into the 5 don'ts of software development, let's just go through the changelog, because quite a lot has changed recently in terms of How to Code Well, the platform, and other newsy type bits that I want to talk about. First of all, I have a new personal site that I have created. We built this, actually, or we improved this on the Tuesday stream. So I live stream as well on Tuesday at 6 p.m. on YouTube, 6 p.m. in GMT world. And this personal site is my site. It's because there's 2 things really. One is that I'm going to be doing some public speaking this year, and 2, I'm also looking for, I have been looking for a new contract role. So, I'm a contract PHP developer. So I thought it would be a good idea to refresh the personal site. That's peterfisher.me.uk. And I've added a bit of a blog in there too. So it's sort of a side thing from howtocodewell.net, where I've got listing of my old talks that I've given and my future talks. And one of the talks that I will be giving this year is at the Symphony User Group in Portugal, later on in February, and I've got a link. I'll put the link in the show notes. The talk is going to be called Code with Confidence Using PHP Stan. I'm hoping to give that talk a couple of times this year, and the first one that is advertised will be the one at Symphony User Group in Portugal. So that is awesome. I won't be streaming this. What day is it? Sunday. I won't be streaming this Sunday because I'm off seeing relatives, so I won't be streaming on Sunday as I'm traveling. So no Twitch streams this week. I haven't done a lot of How to Code Well this week because I've been very busy, like I said, trying to look for roles and stuff in the evening. So I haven't done a lot of that. I haven't had a chance to do any kind of coding around howtocodewell.net. So that's kind of on pause. We'll pick that up again next week, hopefully. But yeah, that's the changelog, pretty much it. I'll put links to those things that I've mentioned in the show notes below after the stream. Okay, so let's get into the whole point of this show, and that is the 5 don'ts of software development. These are around your sort of how you are as perhaps a person coder tackling problems or looking upon software development. And so these are less technical than I have talked about before. They're not actually going into sort of the technicalities or the methodologies of parts of software development. These are 5 don'ts from sort of the human perspective, if you will. So The first one is to don't rush. So read the problem more than once. Read the problem more than once. And when I say the problem, I mean like if you have a requirement or you need to fix a bug or you've got a ticket that you're trying to work through or a user request that you're trying to deal with or a user story, read it more than once. Read the thing more than once. I am going to lean on a lot of my experience. I've got 20 years of experience to sort of pick apart on this, and I have fallen down the trap many times before where I have rushed into things and I haven't read the full thing, and I haven't. There are particular sort of keywords in the problem or the ticket that I've just completely overlooked, or I've made an assumption, a wild assumption that I should never have done. And because of that, I have thought in a very cocky kind of manner, yeah, I can solve this, and I go and solve it, and I'm actually solving the wrong thing, or I'm making the situation worse because I didn't read the question more than once, or read the problem more than once, or understand. It's all about understanding the requirements. So take your time when reading the problem. If it doesn't make sense to you, so if you're reading the thing and it's like, this doesn't make any sense as you from a technical perspective, then what I try and do now is to read or to rewrite the problem in my own language, in a language that I understand. So I would probably break perhaps a user story down into something that I would understand. And then I would ask the person who originally wrote the ticket to check my understanding based on what I have created. Because some people attack problems from different angles. And some people sort of say things differently. Or if you're working in a team where you've got lots of different departments, they may call the same thing but differently. They may use different acronyms. They may put more emphasis on certain elements of the ticket, and they may themselves not appreciate the other problems that are related to that. So if you're tackling the problem from a different perspective to the original author of that ticket, then you may come across other situations or other issues or problems with the solution that is proposed. And so this is a way of having discussion and to ask questions to understand the situation better. So don't rush. That's number one. Do not rush into a solution without actually first fully understanding the problem. And this may require a level of investigation. It's perfectly acceptable for you as a coder to say, I don't understand yet. I don't understand what the solution could be. Okay, so I may understand the problem, but I don't understand what the solution could be. Therefore, I need to go and actually do a level of investigation and then come back to the original author of this ticket and say, this is what I found out. Maybe we shouldn't go down this proposed route. Maybe we should do this because of all the other things that all the other threads that I've pulled. And also, breaking down the problem into smaller little chunks is incredibly useful. Incredibly useful. So, some of these tickets you may have could be single lines of text. This doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. But actually, when you start getting into the weeds, things are actually more complicated. So perhaps you may need to have a particular user and a particular user state, an account state. Maybe it's a particular product that you're dealing with, or a particular service that you're dealing with. Gather all of this into your notes, as I mentioned before. So reword the problem in your own sort of language. But also, when you're doing this, break down the problem. So you're doing this sort of level of investigation where you're dismissing possible situations. You're like, no, that doesn't affect it, that doesn't affect it, that doesn't affect it. And you're narrowing down your field of view of what the problem is. And when you're and that makes it easier to focus on, because you're not worried about the other features that the system may have. And also when you actually come to writing the solution, so coding, you're breaking things up into smaller little bite-sized chunks, which allows you to actually focus on those pieces of code in sort of individual, without worrying about all the other pieces of code that may that float around it. That's just street furniture. So you're breaking down the problem, breaking down the solution as well. Okay, so number 2, that was number 1, so don't rush. Number 2 is to don't panic. Bugs can always be solved. Bugs can always be solved. A computer only does what it is told to do. So if it's been told to do something wrong, it will do it wrong. Or if it's been told to do something without the right parameters or assumptions or requirements, then it will go and do something that is perhaps different from what the intention is. So always remember that that it's only doing what you've told it to do. Others have also come before you, and others will also come after you. So you are not alone. You are not alone. So don't panic. You are not alone. Always seek help whenever you don't understand something, whenever you tackle something new. See if there's someone on your team that has done this before or worked on this area before. See if you can get some help, some guidance, and maybe some mentoring. So don't panic there. If you can, think of a solution. If you can't think of a solution, then walk away, but always come back. So if you can't think of a solution, then walk away. Sort of give yourself a time limit. Say if you can't solve this within this amount of time, then walk away from it and then come back. So either take a break, go to have a coffee break, do something completely different, or work on a different bug in a different area. But just be aware that you won't always solve all the bugs at once. There are lots of things that us programmers deal with sort of on rolling days. So it's like, oh, this bug, it's still a bug. I've got this far in it, this down deep in the weeds in it, but I'm not going to be able to solve it today. And so I'm going to sleep on it because I've hit a brick wall, and I need to do a little bit more investigation, but because, it's got late or something like that, or because I just don't understand how this has happened, then I need to take a break from it. I need to think about it from a different perspective. I need to think about it when I'm not in front of the screen. I need to actually think about it, maybe write down some notes, and write it out, speak it out as well. So what I'm saying is not all bugs can get solved straight away. In fact, rarely all bugs can get solved straight away. Okay, so software development is huge. So again, in the don't panic sort of space, software development is huge. It's always changing. It's always evolving. It's growing. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. There is so much to learn. There's more things in software development to learn than you will ever have time to learn. And therefore, don't be afraid to dismiss things, right? Say, I'm not interested in this. It doesn't tickle my fancy. I don't care. So don't worry if you don't feel like you need to learn everything. Only learn the things that you are enjoying, and take your time over that. Try not to dip in and out of all sorts of things. So software development is huge. So just take your time. Just enjoy it. Enjoy it. Okay, so don't worry. This is number 3. Don't worry. We all make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes in software development. I have made a huge amount of mistakes in my career. I've done things where I thought I was coming up with a solution and it obviously wasn't. I've made things a lot worse. I have broken a lot of things. I have by my stupidity in terms of coding or architecting something, I have made the situation far worse down the line. I've done all sorts of things in my 20 years of coding. I've done so many things that looking back on it would, you're like, that's so cringy. Why would I ever have thought that was a good idea to do? I've destroyed local environments, test environments, all sorts of environments. My coding career is pockmarked in all sorts of things that I have done as a coder that I'm not proud of. But that's the only way to learn. You're not suddenly going to. It's not like this thing where you can just sort of, I don't know. Some people are just gifted with running with running with a rugby ball, or throwing, or football, or basketball. You get the naturals, right? I don't think coding's like that. I think there's a lot of hard work that needs to go into that, and I think that there is a lot of failure that everyone has to deal with and cope with. Because with the failure comes experience. So the more you fail, the more you experience. And the more you know in the future, the potential problems that may arise, Anyway, we all make mistakes. So as long as you can learn from them, you are always improving. So, think of them as a good thing, in the sense that you are always improving from your mistakes, as long as you're not making them more than once or twice. So keep away from trends. So again, in this don't worry group, don't worry about trends. Especially when you're new to the industry and you're like, people are talking about Web3, or people are talking about NFTs, and people are talking about the blockchain, and people are talking about this JavaScript framework. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time on stuff that might not even be a thing in 2 years' time. You want to, if you're new to software development, you want to be focusing primarily on the basics of software development, rather than the attractive street furniture that goes around software development, the things that you might be able to build, or the tools that all the pros are using. Try and keep away from trends, and try and keep away from people who push trends as well, especially if they acknowledge that you are just fresh and new, because they don't have your best wishes at heart, in my opinion. So try and keep to the bare minimum of learning the basics first, understanding the fundamentals, and then, if you want, look into some of these trends. But try and look at, if I was looking for a new job, and if I was relatively new in software development, I would be looking at the job boards to work out what is the most common thing that these job boards require, and then I would learn those things. And believe you me, the most common things that on a job board isn't trendy stuff. Because there's more legacy applications out there that aren't running on these newfangled things. So yeah. So keep away from trends and focus on what you're having fun building as well. So as long as you're having fun building it and you're learning it, then all the power to you. We also all learn at different speeds and at different levels. So don't worry if you feel like you're falling behind, because there may be people who look at or learn particular parts of software development skills far quicker, but then you're quicker learning other skills in software development than they are. So don't worry about that. If you're not picking it up, the penny will drop at some point. If you're really struggling on something, if you're stuck, then the penny will drop, and you will you'll be like, oh yeah, that's the way it works. That's the way it works. But again, if you're stuck and you're struggling with a learning material, then maybe it's the learning material and maybe it's not you. Maybe it's the fact that you're learning this concept, this thing, through some medium that actually isn't very good. So, for example, maybe you're learning it through reading a blog post. And maybe the author of the blog post is looking upon it in a very different perspective to where you are approaching this problem. This happens to me all the time, where I'm Googling this keyword in this error thing, in this error log, and I'm finding all sorts of different people's blog posts regarding this error message, but this error message has happened for them in very different contexts. And so I'm trying to unpick what they've done through a very different context, but because the error message is the same, it's kind of relevant. But in terms of learning, going back to the learning stuff, it might be that you're reading a blog post, but you should actually be watching a video. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're watching a video, but you really should be looking at the syntax on the blog post. So mix and match. And also podcasts. Seriously, listen to people talking about code. Listen to coders and what they are getting up to. You don't have to write code to learn code. This whole push with the 100 days of code, I appreciate that's really good. But seriously, if you're writing code for 100 days non-stop, then that in itself is quite heavy and prone to burnout. Listen to people talking about code. Listen to coders. Watch coders. Watch talks. Go to talks. Socialize with other coders. That is all part of the learning process. You don't have to just keep writing code. And actually, to be brutally honest, coders read more code than they write. And I've said this time and time again. When you write code, you're not only just writing the piece of code that you're trying to put down, but you're also reading the code around it to see if it works and fits. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle. So reading someone else's code is you actually absorbing it and learning it. Okay, so I've totally missed my place. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Thank you, buddy. Thanks for joining. Where are we? So, we all learn at different speeds and different paces, different levels. At the start, don't worry about how long it takes you to come up with a solution. And I caveat this by saying at the start, because at the start, you are obviously learning about all the various different things in software development to do the thing that you want to do. When you're actually being paid for something, when you're actually being paid to do software development, then there becomes a requirement of time. And estimating time is a skill in itself. You don't have to worry about that when you're just starting, when you're fresh, obviously, but maybe when you are being paid for something, paid for your skills and your expertise, you need to think about how to do things more efficiently and therefore quicker, because the quicker you are to actually come up with a solution for your client, the more likely the client is going to give you work compared to someone else who takes ages. But when you're starting out, don't worry about time. It's not like a race to the clock, So the last thing in this don't worry thing, and I know we've covered this don't worry quite a bit, and it is the fact that you don't have to learn every single thing in software development. There's so much of software development that I don't know, or we can break that up even further. There's so much of web development, we can break that even further up. There's so much of back-end development, we can break that up even further. There's so much of PHP that I don't know. And I'm not going to need to know to do my job. And that may seem weird, but there is, there's certain elements of the programming language or web development or software development that I will never need to know in order to do my job. Which is a little bit different from different industries that need to have that level of expertise on certain things. So, I mean, for example, software development is such a huge, broad thing that and it encompasses literally every single industry, because every industry has software, pretty much, and every industry that has software therefore has pretty much a back end and a front end. You know, you can't be expected to know every single nuance of every single thing at once. That's impossible. It's impossible. And to this day, I'm finding new PHP functions or methods, or even reading the RFCs and going, I didn't even know that was a thing, and now that's been deprecated. Like that happened the other day when they deprecated something for a PHP 9, and I was like, we can still do that? Or we've been able to do that? I've never known. Yeah, so don't worry about learning everything. You can't. You simply can't. It's not physically possible to learn every single thing in your field, so don't worry. But what you can do is what you can eventually do is carve out a niche in that field, in that particular space of software development, and that can be your playground, you know. Okay, so number 4 is to don't overdo it. Okay, so learn to pump the brakes if you are reaching burnout. Therefore, this means that you need to learn what burnout is and know how to identify burnout. And I've talked about burnout before. I hit burnout quite a bit. I'm certainly not someone to say, oh, you know, this is burnout and blah, 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 and you should, you know, because burnout happens, and I am someone who suffers from burnout, as a lot of people do. I don't know any software developer who doesn't ever have burnout. So, you know, but it's something that I have come to learn to expect, and something to identify. And those characteristics of burnout are important to identify and manage. So holidays are holidays, hands off code. That's something that it's a very important thing. It's like, you know, hands off the code. When you are having a holiday, hands off code. And this could, you know, you could even go even further and say, well, my weekend is my holiday. If that's the case, good. Hands off the code on the weekend. I don't do that because of, you know, how to code well is mostly done on the weekend, so I can't really do that. But, you know, I know that there are some people who have very strict rules as to what is work life and what is, what is, what's the word, social life? What's that? And more power to them. So learn how to put those barriers up. So learn how to identify burnout. Keep doing other things that you enjoy outside of work, which is something that I have struggled with personally. So in this section, it's a lot of things, do as I say, not as I do. But to be honest, coding was and always will be not only my my job, my career, but also my passion. And so it's very difficult to split between hobbies or have different hobbies when the hobby is your craft. But if you have a hobby outside of coding, then ensure that you have time for it, make time for it, and use that as your downtime. I suppose, you know, I do a lot of exercise. I do a lot of running with Murphy. Murphy is the I can say it now, one of 2 English Springer Spaniels that I own, because we have got another one on the go. Coming soon. Murphy is going to have a brother soon. Woo! So I run with Murphy, and I do a lot of exercise, but I wouldn't say that's a hobby. That's kind of just keeping yourself alive and healthy. But if you do things like painting, or if you do a lot of, drawing or what have you, then, or even if it's just playing computer games, if you do that, anything that you're enjoying that isn't coding, you want to keep doing that. Make sure that you are keeping doing that, because that is the thing that is turning your brain off and sort of letting you reset, and sort of it makes you a better rounded person, I think. And this is something that I would love to try and do more of, but like I said, How to Code Well happens on the weekend, so it's and some of the evenings, so it's a tight squeeze. Okay, so socialize with coders outside of work. So go to meetups, go to user groups, listen to people. Even think about doing some talks yourself, if you can. That would be awesome. But essentially, just don't overdo the coding. You don't want to get to a point where you learn to hate it or despise it. It should be enjoyable. It should be something that you are excited to do. Sometimes I get periods of time where I'm itching to write code, and it's this weird thing that I can't really explain very well. It's this thing where I got this at Christmas because there was a bit of downtime. I felt ill around that time, and so I didn't do a lot of. I didn't do any videos, and I was just thinking of projects. So my mind was nice and relaxed and calm, and I was just thinking of things that I could build. And I just wanted to build code. I wanted to write code, and I think that hunger is something that will be always with me, to build things, create things. I see coding as a creative thing. Okay, so last one. This is very important. The last one is to don't overthink it. So over abstracting a solution is very common, and it's a big mistake. So when you're breaking things down, going back to one of the points that I made earlier about breaking down the problem into smaller chunks, when you're doing that, it's very tempting to over abstract it, because when you're breaking things down into smaller bite-sized chunks, you are genericizing the solution that you're coming up with, because you're breaking it down into smaller little bite-sized bits and pieces that can perhaps be sort of moved around and called at various different places, or architected slightly differently. And there's a temptation there of abstracting it and abstracting it out. If you're trying, something that that I fall into this quite frequently, and that's over abstraction. It's just part and parcel of software development. I don't think you can get away from that temptation. However, acknowledging over abstraction is very important when you identify that you are actually, this is an over abstraction, and the last hour of over abstraction has now been wasted. But don't be worried, or don't be scared to try something and then back away from it and pulp and revert the change. So yeah, don't over abstract the solution. It's just syntax at the end of the day. It's just written in a different order. Like, I mean, if you write one for each loop in PHP, you've written many for each loops in PHP. It's just a case of the order in which things go, and that's the flow of the application. So don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. It's just the same syntax. It's just written differently in a different order. Learn the basics before jumping into the deep end. All right, this is incredibly important. So when you're going back to the trends, don't overthink it. Don't think that you need to build a rocket ship when you actually need just a car. Don't overthink it. Don't jump into the deep end. acknowledge what the deep end is and perhaps acknowledge what's in there, but also acknowledge that you don't actually need to be in there for the thing that you're dealing with at this particular time. I found this very difficult personally when I was building the How to Code Well site in the early days. So I was constantly looking at overcomplications, solutions of things. So, for example, the howtocodewell.net site is something that we've been building for a long time, and the reason why it's taken so long is because I have over abstracted it. It's because I've overthought it. It's because I've used tools and methodologies that just are completely and utterly overpowering for what it needs, or just I'll only use like 10% of all the things that I've been looking into. We built a whole microservice suite for howtocodewell.net. It doesn't need it. I brought it back into a monolith. After a lot of soul searching, I decided that I would merge all the repos together into one single mono repo, and here we are today. I decided that it would be best to write everything in a static site, so I was using React and GraphQL. That was a mistake. That was a huge mistake. A lot of time and energy was spent doing that. Do I regret it? Yes, in part. I have learned a load of stuff that I probably won't need, but it's good to know. But what I'm trying to say here is that it's very tempting to jump on the wagon of the new trendy tools or something that is more exciting. And as programmers, we do get bored. It's like, well, we're working on this new feature. Now I can actually use this new shiny tool that I've just heard of. Wouldn't that be exciting? Because it mixes it up a bit, which in some cases is good, but when you're learning and you're trying to build something on a deadline, that is where the problem lies, because you need to acknowledge that you need to have some time for investigation, and you need to time box that. And that's what I wasn't doing. I wasn't time boxing it. I was just running with it. I was just running with the idea and just going down various different rabbit holes and overthinking the solution when the solution was actually relatively simple. And to this day, I'm still having to unpick things. I mean, in the last stream that we did, I deleted a whole bunch of code, dead code, that was no longer being called, but has been tested. So down the rabbit hole I went. I wrote a bunch of code around APIs. These APIs were never going to actually be called because they would never actually be never be used. But they were still there, so their endpoints were still there, and they were well tested using codeception. So when the tests just passed, I was just like, okay, yeah, it's just passed. But only when I stopped to actually have a look at what the tests were testing, I realized, well, hang on a minute. This code is never ever going to be used. So I'm just testing something that I know will never be used, but the test's coming back okay, so I've left it in. So last week, I did spend a bit of time just going through dead code and removing as much dead code as I could possibly find. But it's just legacy. It's technical debt. At the end of the day, it's technical debt. And technical debt does come about in part because you've overthought the solution. Very important. Okay, so the next one is, or another one in this don't overthink it part, is the fact that, I think I've mentioned this before, is that you can learn by listening, watching, coding, and reading. You don't have to always write the code in order to learn the code. And lastly, something that is super important and something that a lot of people say, I will not do this because I'm embarrassed with the way I write, or I don't want other people to read it, but I must say this is super important, and that is to keep a log of what you've learnt, because there are times in software development when you're learning and you're like, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not progressing, this isn't I'm not improving. But if you have a log of all the things that you've you've learnt, and you can look back on all of that, then you have proof. You have proof that you are improving. So I mentioned earlier about the 100 days of code. That is a good way of proving to yourself factually that you actually have improved, because you can look back at your tweets and you can go, yeah, I know, on day 30 I was learning this, and day 20 I was learning that. Well, if you can keep a log, or better still, a blog of what you've learnt, then you can also share that with others. And like I mentioned earlier about me trying to find blog posts related to error messages, and then finding out that the context that the blog post is written in is very different from the context that I'm working on. That is an example of someone who has created a blog post for an error message quite legitimately, but they have found it through a different point of entry. But I've still found that blog post incredibly useful. And, I applaud people who spend time to actually write a blog post on a solution that they've found for a particular error that I can search against. Even if the context is different, the solution sometimes is the thing that I need, or they'll give me an indication in their blog post to look for something else. It's like, oh yeah, they've mentioned that. Maybe I'll go and have a look at that. So keeping a blog post of the things that you've learned, or the solutions that you've come up with on your day-to-day challenges, is really important. And please don't think that, there's been so many programmers before me, so there's no point in me actually writing a blog post. When you write a blog post that describes a solution to a problem, or describes how to do something, you're writing it for yourself, not for other people. But other people may find that useful. So please write them. Anyway, thank you ever so much for listening. This has been great. I enjoy talking about these things. If I don't speak to you, or if I'm yes, so I will try and tweet as much as I can, and do the YouTube stuff as much as I can in the next week. But like I said, I'm incredibly busy right now, so you may find that I either push something out to say that I'm late, or something isn't happening in the How to Code Well space in the next few weeks. But I'll try my hardest to let everybody know if I have to skip anything, like a stream. But yeah, it's all good fun. Thank you ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will hopefully speak to you all again at some point in the near future in February. Take care, everyone. Happy coding. Cheers. Bye-bye.